Chapter 8. Look. Dink pointed to a small framed picture on the bedside table. Mr. and Mrs. Jeffers. You know these people? Livy asked. We met them yesterday, Ruth Rose said. We think one of them might be the ghost. Livy's eyes grew wide. Why would they want to scare the guests away? They seem so nice. That's what we plan to find out, Dink said. Livy carefully placed the wig back on the closet shelf. As she stepped back, her arm caught on something. A long silver object clunked to the floor. It's the ghost's sword, Ruth Rose said. She picked it up and laughed. It's just painted wood. Guys, look at this stuff. Josh had been examining some tubes and bottles on a vanity table. Look, white clown makeup and black. This is what I smelled in the hallway last night. Hey guys, a tape recorder, Ruth Rose said. Kids, please don't touch. Before Livy could finish, Ruth Rose had pushed the play button. Suddenly the room was filled with spooky noises. Livy and the kids listened as a voice moaned and groaned. Those are the same noises we heard last night, Dink said. Have you seen Mr. and Mrs. Jeffers this morning, Ruth Rose asked Livy. Livy shook her head. Maybe they went out for breakfast. She looked at her watch. And I have to get busy. Livy locked the door behind them, and they all got in the elevator. Thanks for letting us in, Ruth Rose said to Livy. Livy put one finger to her lips. Let's keep this a secret, okay? She whispered. From you-know-who. It's a deal, Ruth Rose whispered back. The elevator door opened, and Livy left the kids in the lobby. There's Mr. Linkletter, Josh said. Maybe he knows where Mr. and Mrs. Jeffers went. The kids walked over to the front desk. Mr. Linkletter looked as if he hadn't been to bed. His suit was rumpled and his hair stuck up in the back. Maybe we shouldn't disturb him, Ruth Rose whispered. But we have to find Mr. and Mrs. Jeffers, Dink said. We don't have much more time. Dink walked up to the desk and put on his best smile. Hi, Mr. Linkletter. Mr. Linkletter gazed down at Dink. Oh, hello, he said. Do you happen to know where Mr. and Mrs. Jeffers are this morning? He asked. Mr. Linkletter waved his hand toward the door. They told me they were going to Ellie's for breakfast. Thanks, Mr. Linkletter, Dink said. The kids left the hotel and hurried up Main Street toward Ellie's diner. What are we going to say to them? Josh asked. We can't just walk up and accuse them of being the ghost, can we? Ruth Rose pushed open the door to the diner. Don't worry, she said. I have a plan. Ellie was behind the counter mixing tuna salad in a bowl. She waved as the kids sat in one of the booths. There they are, Josh whispered. He nodded his head toward another booth, where Mr. and Mrs. Jeffers were eating breakfast. They look so nice, Dink said. Not like people who would try to ruin a hotel. Ellie came to their booth. Back so soon? She asked, opening her pad. Don't tell me you're having another breakfast. Can I borrow your pad and pencil? Ruth Rose asked. Ellie gave Ruth Rose a sly smile and handed them over. What are you kids up to? She asked. I'll give them back in a minute, Ruth Rose said. Okie dokie. I'll see you in a minute then, Ellie said, heading back to her tuna salad. Ruth Rose began writing. What are you doing? Josh asked. Wait a sec, Ruth Rose said. She finished and pushed the pad in front of Dink and Josh. What do you think? Dear Mr. and Mrs. Jeffers, we know all about the white wig and the tape recorder. Guess who? Ruth Rose, what if we're wrong about the Jefferses? Dink asked. We're not wrong, Ruth Rose said, getting up. She walked over to Ellie, said something to her, and handed her the pad. Ellie smiled at Ruth Rose, then headed for the Jefferses' booth. Ruth Rose hurried back and sat down. Now watch, she told Dink and Josh. They watched as Ellie handed the note to Mrs. Jeffers. Mrs. Jeffers read the note, then said something to Ellie. Ellie pointed towards the kids. Mrs. Jeffers waved, and Ruth Rose waved back. Come on, Ruth Rose said. She walked over to the Jefferses' booth. Dink and Josh were right behind her. Hi, Ruth Rose said, pulling the white hair from her pocket. I think your wig got caught on the fire door last night. You left this. She placed the white hair on the green placemat. Mrs. Jeffers stared at the hair, then at the kids. Finally, she looked at her husband. Mr. Jeffers sighed, then grinned at the kids. "Looks like you got us," he said.